Well, the three top performing stocks of the last week all did the same thing early in its upward trend. I'm going to show you what that is. It's going back to what we talked about in last week's video. And I'll walk you through not only the indicator and how it works, but also the theory behind it. And if you understand this concept, you can find the big winning stocks early in the upward trend. So let's just get into sort of what's behind this. Almost all stocks that make major percentage gains over a number of days, sometimes even a single day, they'll start their move with abnormal activity, abnormal price gain, and abnormal volume. Now, as I talked in last week's video, I created an indicator called the action candle, which looks for statistically significant abnormal price and volume activity. And I run this all day long, looking at 1-minute candles, 13-minute candles, hourly candles, daily candles. You can use this indicator on any time frame. It's very, very useful. For swing trading, I like to apply it to the 13-minute chart. It's a useful way to find the stocks to be in and out over the next 4 or 5 days, let's say. The top performing stocks almost always will trigger this indicator early in the trend. The only time it doesn't is when there's a news announcement like a buyout where a stock just gaps up from $10 to $15 or something like that because of a buyout. But when there's news that's not buyout related and the stock sort of gathers the buyers and aggressively acting buyers, they'll push the stock up a number of days. And the stocks that we're going to look at in just a moment all did this. And then I'm going to show you another stock at the end of the video which did it on a shorter term time frame. So let's dive into the charts here. Here is TDTH. This is a low price stock. And anywhere you see a pink and yellow dot, that is my action candle indicator. And what it signals is that there was abnormal price and abnormal volume. So you can see the price gain over that 13-minute time frame was an abnormal move. Visually you can see it, but we need a computer to find these things in a timely way. There was a couple back here on July 11th, and there was one here on July 15th, and that started this big upward trend where the stock went from 40, 50 cents up to $1.70. So a 300% gain. Let's look at another example. This is CYCC. Now this one did most of its gain in a single day. July 15th, right there, it broke from low volatility. And again, this is just a rehash of what we did last week. And I encourage you to go back to last week's video. Make sure you're subscribed to the Stockscores YouTube channel because I'm doing these educational videos every week. Anyway, so we have low volatility here. There's nothing going on with the stock. And then it comes alive with abnormal price and volume activity. The action candle indicator signals that. You don't have to use the indicator. If you can watch these stocks, if you have a way to find the stocks making big jumps and getting ahead of the crowd on these things, then that's another way to do it. But you can see here the big run, from $5 to $18. Another more than 300% gain, this one in just a single day. And then it quieted down again, made a new action candle here on Friday, July 18th, and once again, $10 to $18. Very quick run over the course of less than an hour. Got one more example. This is Open, and this is another one of the top performers this week. But notice, boring, low volatility trading, and then comes alive with abnormal activity. The volume starts to increase. We get the pink and yellow dot there. If there's a pink dot only, that just means that it had abnormal price movement, but not abnormal volume. When you have pink and yellow, it means abnormal volume and abnormal price. And you can learn more about this indicator at my website, Stockscores.com. It's something I share with my active trader members of Stockscores. You can learn more about how to become a member at my website. Again, Stockscores.com. We'll go to the website in just a minute. All right, so that is the very simple way to find stocks that are going to make big gains. And I would say 95% of all stocks that make really significant market-beating gains will fire the action candle early in the trend. Now, not before the trend starts. We have to wait for the excitement to come. The excitement is caused by people that are close to the company or maybe follow the news very closely. They find out there's a catalyst for big fundamental change. They jump in the stock and they leave a trail for us to follow. When I see that abnormal activity, I know something's going on. I don't care what the news says. I don't take any time to go read it. I trust that the people who are reading it are doing the work and they're starting to buy aggressively, and I'm just one step ahead of them, or sorry, one step behind those people, but 10 steps ahead of the crowd who are buying a lot later. All right, well, now let's get into this week's market analysis. And if you're new to the Stockscores YouTube channel, this is something I do every week. Just give you an overview of the markets in general. I look at the US markets, Canadian markets, commodities, currencies, the bond market, to give you a sense of where the trend is and what's likely happening in the market. So let's jump into Stockscores.com now, where I'll pull up the charts. And while I'm here, just remember that I have a free weekly newsletter. It goes out most weeks on Sundays or Mondays usually. And in that newsletter, I often pick stocks. I've had a lot of great picks in there, and it's free, so I encourage you to register for that. But let's jump into some analysis of the chart. So this is the S&P 500, and very simply, we can see that the trend is up. The bottoms are rising, the buyers are in control, and although we're getting a little extended perhaps, it's a bull market for the S&P 500. If we look at the short-term chart, you can see there again the trend is up, so we have to call this a bullish market on both time frames, short and long term. On the NASDAQ 100, virtually the same sort of chart, so we won't spend much more time on that. IWM, which is the small cap market, a little bit more of an underperformer, but it over the last 3 months has had steadily rising bottoms as well, so the buyers are in control. The difference here is we're not at new highs. We have to deal with this resistance over here and then the resistance at these peaks, and so there's a little bit more of a wall for this market to bump up against. Having said that, you know, the top performing stocks generally are small cap stocks. And when I showed those 3 big winners from the past week, they all fall into that category of small cap stocks. That's where most of the good opportunities tend to come from. Let's take a look at the Canadian market. T.XIU is much like the S&P 500 in an upward trend, all-time highs. Volume's a little quiet, you know, summer market, but the sellers are not strong, and therefore, if you're in the market, continue to hold. Now let's look at some of the commodities. Now gold had a great run. If we look back a little farther, you'd see that this absolutely went parabolic. Right now it's in a process of building a base. So this is called an ascending triangle. It's an important pattern because what's going on with this pattern is the volatility of price action is compressing. Okay, you can see that the waves up and down are getting tighter, and that's kind of like a coiled spring, and when it can break through resistance, it will often go higher. So watch for that. If instead it were to break down, then you want to get defensive, and if you're in gold, probably take some profits there. But for now, I would say it's a hold. I don't feel super comfortable chasing it here. If you look at this 3-year weekly chart, it's had such dramatic gains. Now, one thing worth noting is that this latest upward trend in gold started right there. And notice that the volume was higher than normal. Notice that the price action was abnormal. So again, another example of how my action candle and the concept behind it signaled this very strong run, a breakthrough resistance from optimism, from low volatility with abnormal activity, sending gold from 200 to 310. That's better than a 50% gain on that commodity. All right, let's take a look at oil, which is a very different chart from gold. It's very choppy. It's actually quite difficult to predict when these things are this choppy. If we look at the 3-year weekly chart, you can see that oil has just been stuck in a sideways range. It can't seem to get through that resistance level, but when it comes down to this floor price, it also tends to bounce. And we saw that happen a couple of months ago. I predicted that oil would probably bounce off of that. It has. It went up to the ceiling and it got stuck. And now we're sort of in the middle of the range. Not a great looking market, not a bad looking market either. All right, let's move along to currencies. US dollar is, in this downward trend. Of course, tariffs and those sorts of things hurting the US dollar. But if we look at the 3-year chart, we can see that we are at that floor price. Much like oil had a floor price, US dollar is hitting this floor. It should hold there. We need to see it break this downward trend line, which it could do soon. And then if it does so, we might get back into this trading range and move up here. But for now, I would say fairly bearish, but neutral in the last couple of months because it's kind of stopped going down. Now let's take a look at Bitcoin, which is very different because Bitcoin is in an upward trend. It's a little more obvious if you look at the 3-year chart. You can see the upward trend has been underway for a while. Again, abnormal price action, abnormal volume from low volatility, and that was the start of this nice upward trend in Bitcoin. It is getting to the top of the channel, so we'll probably see it get stuck here, maybe pull back. There were some good fundamental things going on with Bitcoin, with the US government sort of writing a bill around it. But I think that the news is out. The thing that people were speculating on from here to here is done. And so typically when that happens, you'll get a little pullback. So I would watch for that. What you want to watch for is if you go to the 1 month hourly chart like this, or this is a 2-hour chart, if you start to break this upward trend line from a falling top, which it could do next week, maybe if you're a trader, take some profit. If you're a long-term holder of Bitcoin, then the long-term picture is still okay. All right, the last chart we're going to look at is TLT, and this is the bond market. It is a good representation of interest rates. When this is going down, interest rates are going up. So this is the bond market, and that's really where interest rates are driven for mortgages, car loans, and that sort of thing. We are at a floor, so there's not a lot of downside, but the sellers are in control. It's a pessimistic market because the tops are falling. If we look at the 3-year chart on TLT, you can see that we've been pretty much sideways for the last year and a half, 2 years, but we are at this floor. My concern is if we break down through this floor, that means interest rates actually start to rise again. We need to be wary of that because that could have an impact on stocks in general, particularly the small cap stocks. So let's jump into my ratings then. You can see it's all green on stock markets, bullish on all time frames for large cap, NASDAQ, small cap, Canadian stocks. Gold, neutral on both time frames. It's just taking a break. Oil, similar, but oil didn't have the strength and the rally that gold had. US dollar, short-term neutral, but long-term bearish. Bitcoin, long-term bullish, short-term bullish. And bonds, neutral on both time frames. All right, now I want to get into the trade of the week, and we're going to revisit the concept from the top of the video where I was looking at abnormal activity as a clue, as a signal that it's time to take a look at a stock. Ideally, we want that when it breaks from low volatility. Now, this is a stock that was a hot trader, actually a couple days this week, but on Friday, it did so. And again, notice the pink and yellow dots. Now, not all pink and yellow dots matter. The ones that matter are the ones that surprise the market with a break through resistance from low volatility. And so we have 2 of those on this chart. This one, it doesn't matter because it's not breaking from low volatility. If I draw a line across these highs here, that's our line of resistance. I draw a line across these bottoms, it's rising. That's optimism. This is resistance. This is low volatility. And this is a breakout through resistance from low volatility with abnormal volume, with abnormal price action. And that led to a nice little trade over the next hour or so as it moved higher. I hope you've enjoyed this week's video. If so, do me a favor and click on the like button. I'm interested to hear, how do you trade the market? Do you like to focus on abnormal activity? Do you find it's effective for you? Leave a comment with your thoughts on what we've talked about in this week's video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, trade well.